digitization can enable customer-centric supply. My guest is Kendra Phillips. She is Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of New Products with Ryder System, Inc. Hello, Kendra.
Hi, how are you?
I'm
Thank you for
good.
having me today.
Yeah, and thanks for being with me. Let's start out by having you explain just what that phrase I just said means exactly. When we talk about digitization, enabling the customer-centric supply chain, what exactly are we talking about?
Absolutely. Digitization enabling the customer-centric supply chain is about the power of the supply chain to drive a differentiated customer experience. Most companies view the supply chain as something they have, something they deal with. It's a necessary, it's a cost center. But through digitization, we can actually change that. Companies can now use their supply chain to actually gain more customers by providing a better experience.
Okay.
For example, when the pandemic hit, companies that were nimble, that were able to react quickly, they were actually able to keep their products on shelves or get their products to customers through e-commerce very effectively. Those companies were able to actually gain customers, win new business, and increase their brand. The companies who weren't ready to react, who had not yet fully digitized their supply chain, those are the ones that struggled. And the pandemic really showed us the importance of having that real-time digital data.
Well, let me stop you there for a moment and get a definition just of the word digitization, because after all, we've been in a digital era for decades. We've got computers. Those are theoretically digital in nature. But I think when we use the term today, we mean something different. How is it different from past tech implementations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to your point, it's a broad word that means a lot of things. And the real difference today is supply chains have always been heavily paper-based. Whether we want to admit it or not, there's always been a lot of paper in the process, a lot of Excel, emails, phone calls, a lot of manual workarounds. And technology tended to be used after the fact, right? So once a trip was completed, then we would digitize the piece of paper and put it into a system so we could properly pay our bill. But what's different now is we're actually at a mature place across the industry where we can get that information real time. And it's that real time component that's enabling people to be nimble, or companies to be nimble and to react. And it has to be in a broad scope. So it can't just be one piece of the supply chain that has real time accurate information. It has to be broad across the entire supply chain so that companies really know what's going on, really know where their trouble points or blockage points are, and they're able to react to that.
Well, all of your supply chain partners have to be willing and able to get in on the digitization initiative. Otherwise, you're not going to get that real-time flow of information. So are there challenges there in getting everybody on board? Suppliers upstream, and when I say suppliers, I mean multiple tiers of suppliers, and customers and distributors downstream.
Absolutely. There are challenges. This is not easy. You're correct. I think, even if we just take a step back to the ELD mandate, right? The reaction to
electronic logging devices, ELD, yes, electronic logging device. Go
Absolutely.
ahead.
Thank you. So even when that occurred, right, there was a lot of pushback from folks who owned fleets, from carriers and others, around the impact that would have on their operations. But in reality, what that did is it kind of opened the door. It opened the door to digitize because it allowed us to track those trucks in real time. But you had to have carriers on board with that, right? They had to be willing to not just do it, which they were required to by law, but to share that information with the other partners in the supply chain. That's taken years for folks to get comfortable with that idea, right? For people to say, okay, I'm going to share where my assets are at all times with other folks in the supply chain so that they can see if there's any inefficiencies occurring, right? If there's any bottlenecks that have occurred, if I'm running late to a delivery, if I'm stuck at a supplier, whatever it might be. So it's not easy. It's a huge change management process, a huge comfort level. There's a lot of concerns around proprietary information, and that's a pretty simple use case. You also brought up suppliers. We have not cracked the nut on that by any stretch of the imagination. It's still difficult today to get an accurate ASN or to get real information on when a delivery is going to arrive at your DC or your store. That shouldn't be as hard as it is, but it's still what we have to do as an industry is have all those partners come together to not just digitize their own supply chain, but to share that information. And we're really starting to see those tides turn. And the more, what you're seeing a lot in the industry is a lot of focus on aggregators. So there's a lot of players out there whose sole purpose is to start aggregating data from different players in the supply chain so that others can have access to it to make it easier to share.
Well, you sure need that.
That's what we need.
With so much data out there today, almost more than any human or any company can contemplate making any sense of. That's got to be the key right there, isn't it?
It absolutely is, right? Because you're not only aggregating it, but then you're trying to normalize it across different players, which is very difficult. But we are seeing this happen. It's really occurring, and it's really brought on a lot of it by the pandemic, right? The pandemic, you kind of had to throw all the excuses out the window. You either were able to see your products, know where your products were, understand your inventory levels, know what your suppliers' inventory levels were, know where they were stuck when they couldn't get plastics or aluminum or semiconductors. You had to know that stuff to react. And so I think the pandemic has really pushed us forward in a way that we needed.
What makes it customer-centric? That's another kind of vague term that companies have been throwing around for decades. Maybe now it really means something, but exactly what does that mean as it relates to digitization?
Sure. So I'm gonna kind of flip the tides a little bit there. So if you start thinking differently about the customer experience, so we've all seen, the Amazon effect, right? Going to 2-day delivery, then down to 1 day, down to a couple hours. That's all customer centric. But there's more you can do there. If you think I want to differentiate my product, I want to give my customer a different experience. One way you could do that is if you had that chain of custody in the supply chain, you could actually tell someone where their food products were coming from, right? They were grown at the local farm down the road from you, or they came from a cheesemaker up in Wisconsin, or whatever it was, right? You can actually show that to an end customer as they're purchasing the product. If you had that chain of custody, that could be a very differentiated experience because so many people care about a lot of those items. If you could show the authenticity of a lot of the raw materials that we're pulling, from other parts of the world as they're going through the supply chain, and again, let the end customer see that, they may be willing to pay more for a product that they are feeling is coming through without child labor or other issues. And again, that would enable us to differentiate that experience and use the supply chain as really a selling point for products.
So it's more than a customer asking, where's my product and when is it arriving? You're saying, where is it coming from, all the way to the beginning of the supply chain.
Yes, and I'm not saying we're there. Please don't interpret my words to say we're there. We have that technology available today. But what I'm saying is that's the type of place I think we're leading to as an industry, right? Right now it is, where's my product? I want to know that it's coming to me. But I think we're starting to see that movement of being a lot more creative with how we get that value out of the supply chain for our customers.
Digitization is often spoken of in the same sentence as automation, which implies the lack of removing responsibility from human beings for making key decisions. Where is the role of the human supply chain manager in this future that we are envisioning?
Sure, it's a great question. You absolutely still need the humans. Automation doesn't replace everything by any stretch of the imagination, but the role changes. It really does change. So today's operator is used to putting out fires after they occur. Tomorrow's operator is going to be someone who has to be able to use the data to predict that the fire may occur and change course so that it never happens, right? And it's a different set of skills. So what you really need is folks who are A, comfortable with technology, B, comfortable with data and know how to use data, know how to look at data, analyze data, and then C, people who are comfortable with change. And sometimes that's the hardest part. As human beings, we're not always most comfortable with change, but the industry today, there's so much rapid change, technological change coming at all of us. If we're not comfortable with it, we're going to have a problem. So we really have to know how to adapt it and how to be continuous learners and continuous educators so that we can function in the supply chains as they continue to grow and evolve.
Well, we accept change more readily, perhaps, if we can be assured that we'll still have a role to play at some point in the future. And what you just said certainly suggests that that is the case. Thank you very much for those observations from a very high level about what's going on with digitization and the customer-centric supply chain. I want to turn now to a discussion specifically about Ryder and the part that Ryder is playing in all of this that we just discussed. Can you explain where you guys fit in?
Absolutely. So Ryder is a 3PL. We view it as our job to ensure that we are in front of everything happening with the technology in the industry, and that we can bring that value to our customers. So we do that in a few different ways. We've recently started Ryder Ventures, which is our corporate venture fund. And through that, we partner with many of the startups who are exploring technology in the supply chain. We really look for startups that we think are solving a real business problem, right? A real gap that we have today, and that are doing it in a different out-of-the-box way and using technology to solve that problem. And so we've invested in and partnered in quite a few different startups, and we look to see if those are successful, how we can bring those to our customers, right? So we test them first, we pilot with them, we work with them in different spaces, and then if we find the values there, we're able to bring that value to our customers. So that's very important to us. The other thing we've done.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to switch topics. The other thing we've done is we've also started Ryder Share. So Ryder Share is actually our product that digitizes the supply chain, like we've been talking about. And our goal is very similar to everything we've been saying. So with Ryder Share, we've created a platform that enables us to bring not only our customers who are shippers into that platform, but all of their carriers, their customers, and their supplier. Now, usually just their first supplier, we're not able to go further down in the supply chain yet, but we're able to bring everyone into that platform so they can see the same information. It's real-time information, and then they can actually communicate within the product together to solve any disruptions that may occur. So we rolled out Ryder Share almost a year ago. We've been very excited by the results, and the timing with the pandemic was actually quite fortunate because a lot of our customers then were able to see their supply chains and react and be nimble to the supply chains through Ryder Share.
So digitization has certainly come to Ryder, has it not? I mean, you would say that you fully embrace that concept.
It has, absolutely. We have. And I mean, it has been a change management process, right? It is not something that happens overnight. But we as feel this is extremely important in the future, and we want to be leaders in this space.
Yeah, interestingly, how the third-party logistics industry has evolved, starting with basically just handling physical product and logistics, and now it's so important that information becomes just as essential a part of your service offering as it used to be. Kendra Phillips, I want to thank you so much for being our thought leader today on the subject of digitization and the customer-centric supply chain, as well as telling us a little bit about where Ryder fits into that picture as well. Thank you for being with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.